Welcome back to another chilling night of stories. Grab some popcorn and flick the lights off because I have two very disturbing horror stories for you tonight. Our first story is, there's a ladder in the middle of the ocean. It was discovered 25 miles off the coast of Maine by a lobster fisherman. The tip of a rusted rung ladder, patinated and crusted with barnacles, jutting up through the ocean's glassy skin. You haven't heard about it on the news. You wouldn't have. The Navy buttoned it down faster than you can say Semper Fortis. Sonar scans showed the ladder descended in a vertical line for 8 miles. That's 6 miles past the ocean floor, disappearing into a newly discovered trench that made Mariana look like the shallow end of the pool. Okay, I'm being facetious, but it goes without saying that higher-ups were concerned. Who the fuck had built a ladder in the middle of the ocean? Where'd this trench come from? Aliens? Russia? That's where I came in. I was a medic officer in the Navy's oceanography program, working on an experimental. Never mind. Not that it doesn't matter. It does. But if I talk about what I did, who I am, and why I'm here, I'd no doubt wake up on a trapdoor with a noose around my neck and treason charges being read to me by a guy in a starched uniform. I figure there's a damned good chance that might happen anyway. Still, I'm compelled to document this because people deserve to know what I saw. The things that haunt the back of my eyelids when I close them at night. I'm in a military hospital right now, laid up in my own private suite. I'm trying to heal, but without rest it's proving impossible. I figure getting this out of my system might help. I hope it will, at least. But what do they say in Shawshank? Hope is a dangerous thing. Anyway, I was never great at beginnings, but I guess I should start with the dive. We called it a submersible, but it was really a suit. This was no Jules Verne clunky, cumbersome, sink-like-a-rock diving suit. It was lightweight, pressure-resistant, and equipped with all the bells and whistles that lent it its not unfair nickname Iron Man. That's not to say it was one of those skin-tight jobs you see scuba divers wearing. It looked more like those suits guys defusing bombs in war zones wear. That aside, I was thankful there wasn't going to be a 60-pound oxygen tank misaligning my spine. The Iron Man was equipped with an electrolysis filter which converted ocean water into breathable oxygen. The whole shebang was invisible on enemy radars and could supposedly withstand a descent of this stature, not that it had been tested. Basically, I'd be crawling down an ominous 8-mile ocean ladder in an experimental suit that had only been tried in Navy swimming pools. My colleagues seized on this predicament, jokingly calling me Laika in the hours leading up to the dive. In case you're not familiar, Laika was the dog Soviets shot up into space in the 50s. The dog who died. So, as I stood on the hem of a small Navy vessel, also experimental, don't even ask, looking at the first few rungs of the ocean ladder which sat 20 feet off the starboard, I wondered if this was my last taste of fresh air. I hope your lunch wasn't too risky. My colleague Matilda joked with a smirk. Blowing gas in that thing, you'll probably suffocate. I smiled, but behind my smile were nerves, raw, tingling nerves. I think she saw because her hand landed on my shoulder. You'll do fine, Jones. This time I smiled for real, hoping she was right. A nearby tech asked me if I was ready. I nodded, and the bulky submersible's helmet descended me like a meteor. It really was Iron Man. The big window visor on the front of the helmet doubled as a screen, with oxygen and depth readings, as well as direct comms too from my people above the surface. There was a POV camera which fed them my perspective as well, so they could monitor and record my descent, which had started an hour ago. I climbed down, rung after rung, daylight fading as I descended into the murky depths. Fish darted past. A little twist of seaweed rolled by. It was all very pastoral, and oddly existential. The ocean, I'm talking the vast naked depths of it, is huge and never-ending. Look both ways, and you see nothing but bluish-green water and swirling walls of sediment. A reminder of how incredibly small and inconsequential you are. It never much bothered me. Only to climb. Now I'll never touch ocean water again. You good, Jones? Matilda's voice in my ear. Yeah, hon, I'm hunky fucking dory. My deltoids are screaming. Should have put in those hours at the gym. Where the hell are those taxpayer dollars going if you don't look good on a recruitment poster? I felt a smile creasing my face. The budget we got, they use models for that kind of thing. What? You're telling me that strapping young stud saying forged by the sea isn't a real seaman? What the hell did I join up for? I laughed. Sheesh. If I'd known I'd get this much one-on-one with you, I'd have put on Iron Man a long time ago. I'm here too. Bradley's voice. Imagine a drone operator, a gangly, pimply kid raised on Call of Duty. That's Bradley. What do they say about 3 being a crowd? I asked. They say you're closing in on 500 meters, Bradley said. Jesus. Already. I looked around. It had gotten darker, the ocean around me fading into a deep, dark blue that bled into a murky cloud. I double-checked my tether. Secure. It was a thick steel cable feeding through a pulley. A thing on rollers about the size of a brick, which ran along the right outer bar of the ladder. The tether was there, in case, for some reason, I lost my grip on the narrow, rusted rungs. 'Cause if that happened, well, anyone seen Gravity? I shuddered at the thought of sinking down and down with nothing and no one to save me. How's breathing? Matilda asked. I smiled at the concern in her voice, looked up at the little black eye on the top right of the visor, a camera pointing down at me. They could see my face. I could, in theory, see them too, had they decided to beam some footage onto my visor screen. But this was no time for screwing around, and my visor was filled with numerical readings. On the left side sat a little map detailing the ladder in my position, a red dot on it. I had barely made a dent. Just fine, darling. The reason we weren't using a pod submersible, a single-man coffin connected to the above by a steel cable, was because I was on the lookout for any markings that might be etched into the ladder's metal skin. Anything to denote its origin. So far, there had been nothing but barnacles, a crab exoskeleton, and a thick patina of algae. When can I ladder slide? Or can you throw a movie up on my screen? This is getting tedious. I was half joking, but not really. It was boring as hell, one rung after the next. To make the descent faster, I was going to ladder slide, hands cupped around the outside rails, feet on the outside for brakes. But I couldn't do that until I hit certain water pressure. Some geeky nonsense about how it would be easier to control the descent. The tether wouldn't be a problem there. The pulley was built to eat through rocks, and had been satisfyingly crunching through barnacles the whole way down. Once you hit 1,000 meters. Bradley's voice. You guys picked that number out of a hat. The deeper you go, the greater the pressure bearing down on you is. Makes it easier to control. Shit. I must have skipped that day in school. I joked. Partly. It was in the orientation, Bradley said, not trying to hide his irritation. I think he must have been jealous of my rapport with Matilda. I skipped that too. Matilda chuckled. I smiled again, even though I hadn't been joking. Closing in on 750M, Leica.T. Matilda said, calling me that goddamn dog. Better hope I've got a little more luck in my bones than rusty canines, I said, secretly hoping I was right. I'd hate for you guys to fish me up and just find my naked skeleton. You've got charm. That's gotta be worth something, Matilda said, a smile in her voice. Is it worth dinner next week? Bradley groaned. God, you guys make me sick. I chuckled. Don't get blue, kiddo. You can carry rings at the wedding. Matilda laughed. Dinner first. Where? I know this great place called the Base Cafeteria. 8 o'clock Friday? It's a date, I said, continuing down into the abyss. I had worked up a killer sweat by the time I'd reached the midnight zone, which sat just past 1,000 meters. Murky blackness crushed in. It was suffocating. Eerie. I clicked on my shoulder-mounted floodlights. 2 powerful beams of light blasted forward and wham! An ugly deep sea fish with a mouth of fangs went whizzing by my head. I barked a pathetic yelp and jerked back, nearly losing my grip on the ladder. "What's wrong? You okay?" Matilda asked, concerned. "Fine. Satan's spawn just caught me off guard." "Deep sea life?" "The deepest." "Your gopher slide," Bradley said. I hesitated, suddenly not sure how I felt about plunging down at speeds unknown into the deep, inky blackness beneath me. "Wish me luck, kids." "Luck," Bradley and Matilda said in chorus. I sucked a deep breath, moved my hands and feet off the rungs into the outer rails, and then I slid. It wasn't as exciting as I'd thought, but it was considerably faster and less draining than climbing down. My eyes watched the ladder blur by, still on the lookout for any markings. Once or twice I skidded to a stop, thinking I had spotted something, only to discover it was nothing but deep-sea gunk caked to the metal. By the time I did see any markings, I was too far gone for anyone to care. I stopped, not sure what I was looking at. A strange symbol etched directly into the middle of the rung in front of me. It looked like a weird cross between Arabic and Chinese. "Guys, you seen this?" No reply. "Hello?" No reply. Finally, Matilda's voice. "Jones, the footage is freaking out. You okay?" "I'm fine. Is this getting through?" Silence. No reply. "Jones, you there?" Matilda, growing concerned. I said I'm cool. Bradley, distress in his voice. "Buddy, you getting us?" "Just fine. Can you hear me?" I felt panic squeezing at my lungs. Was the comm system fucking up? My screen began to flicker, glitching out. I was growing concerned. "Jones, you're not coming through." I reached up to my visor and gave it a smack. The readings on the screen momentarily realigned before spazzing out beyond control. Now my colleagues' voices were warbled. Words were lost, full of static. "Jones can't hear. Are you? Guys, I can't hear you." Fear in my voice. A low hum built in my ears, and then silence. No voices. Nothing. My helmet basked in the glow of the flickering screen. I had lost contact with the world above. I froze, not sure what to do. Split between the symbol on the rung and the disconnect from my safety net. Well, that's not completely true. Remember the tether connecting me to the rung ladder? There was a little button on the pulley box beneath a lucite case. Punch that button and the pulley box would zip me back up to the surface. Okay. Fuck it. I was going back up. None of this was worth a damn if I didn't have my crew watching my back. I fumbled out an underwater camera stashed in the pouch on my chest, snapped a photo of the symbol, and began the 10-foot climb back up to the pulley box. That's when I saw the mermaid. It flitted out of view, the silhouette of a man-sized fish. I froze, not sure what I'd seen. It had only been there for an instant, etched in the beam of my floodlights. Then it was gone. Had I really seen anything? My breath was shallow, cold in my helmet. I looked to my right. The water was black and murky. I looked to my left, and at first, I didn't realize what I was seeing. A wall of bodies. Hundreds of mermaids surrounded me, their eyes glowing pinpricks in the light, their needle-sharp teeth jagged and yellow. They were awful, deep-sea things, their tails yellow and scaly, their torsos pale and emaciated. Instead of arms, they had straw-thin appendages with hooked tips. When my light hit them, they broke apart, darting off into the darkness in a cacophony of shrill chitters. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, my voice hoarse, my throat like sandpaper. I looked up and saw the pulley box, 5 rungs away, the button taunting me, the button that would save me. Or maybe I was already past the point of saving. I didn't wait. I climbed. Fast as I could go. 1 rung after the next. 4 rungs. 3. 2 nigher. A shrill, chittering split through the water. I looked to my left as a mermaid shot toward me, its hooked appendages clawing at my suit. I grunted and threw up a defensive arm. A razor shredded through my flesh. Blood plumed out of my ruined arm. I cried out. My suit beeped, screaming warnings in my ear. The fabric instantly sucked together, automatically sealing the breach as the mermaid flew off and in came another. I threw the button box on the pulley open, about to slam it down when a freight train barreled through my midsection. The horrible twisted face of the mermaid filled my visor. It had torn me off the ladder. I floated, entangled with this awful creature. Its gills undulated as it chittered in my face, a great ear-shredding sound that cut a bolt of fear through my stomach like an icy dagger. I grunted and jammed my fingers into its gills, hating the way its flesh crackled as I twisted. Now the mermaid was struggling out of my grip. I was winning. Then, I wasn't. Something pounded into the ladder, jarring the pulley box, and something else hammered into my back. It was like being caught in a trash compactor, a dozen of these things crushing in on me. I screamed, flailed, fought for my life. Then suddenly, the mermaids dispersed, tails flickering as they flew off into the depths. I was alone, completely alone, floating through the water. 15 feet from the ladder. I assessed the damage. My suit was mostly okay, except for my arm. Blood plumed through the fabric, funneled out and into the ocean. Each section of Iron Man was isolated, so if one part got damaged, it wouldn't compromise the integrity of the whole outfit. So water wasn't flooding my helmet. Yet. It very well could be soon. There was a crack in my visor. I quickly reeled myself in, closing in on the ladder and the pulley box, which was my last and final hope. Then I saw it. My heart sank. My stomach dropped. The pulley was nearly hanging off the ladder's rail. It was close to breaking off. If that happened, I'd simply drift, fall, in this oppressive darkness. I moved slowly, surely, reeling myself in on the cable which rattled the box with each pull. I was lassoing the excess cable around my elbow as I went. My hands reached out, fingertips skimming the rung ladder. That's when I saw the shark. At first, I thought it may have been a mountain that slid off land some long ago year, left to float these murky depths eternally. But no, it was a shark. The biggest living thing I'd ever seen in my whole life. It must have been twice the size of a Boeing 747. A great pale monster outlined in my floodlights. Eyes as big as swimming pools. Its mouth. I couldn't bear to think what might be in its mouth. Oh my God. But that didn't seem to be enough. Oh my fucking God. It filled my horizon, moving closer. I was paralyzed by fear, my heart jackhammering my ribcage like a manic construction worker. My hands reached out for the ladder, grabbed a rung, started to pull myself up. When the pulley box broke free of the outer rail, I looked up and slipped. My hand slipped. My other hand shot out, grasped the ladder, and then a rush of water blew me away. The shark was passing, and I was sinking, propelled downward by the force of the shark's movement, displacing impossible tons of liquid as it swam. I flailed, grunted, screamed, the readings on my visor still flashing warnings. Then I was being sucked down into the depths. The shark continued on. I drifted down, the ladder slowly, painfully pulling away from me, until it faded from view. I tried calling to my people above, screaming into my helmet. At some point I stopped, realizing they were long gone. And, to them, so was I. I sunk for years. It felt that way at least. Left to die, a prisoner of the ocean. Stranded in a world of darkness. After a while, still sinking, I blacked out. I jolted awake at the bottom of the trench, in the ruins of a great city. Pillars of rock, spires of stone. The husks of incredible mausoleums and colosseums rose around me, greenish in their old patina. The city filled the trench as far as I could see, which was oddly far, seeing as a strange glowing orb filled my horizon. It was an impossible sun, a green ball of light, pulsing and bubbling with heat, hovering off in the distance, bathing these alien depths in ethereal light. I stood up, A thin tendril of blood trailed up through the fabric from the gash on my forearm. I knew it wasn't a mortal cut, but it was nasty and left me feeling woozy. I cinched it tight with a Velcro strap and looked around. There was nothing but dead buildings stretching endlessly. Ugly deep-sea fish cut through vacant windows and doorways. I wandered the city for a while, looking for signs of life or any vestiges of the ladder that had brought me here. I found neither. I walked for a while. Hours. Days, maybe. I slept some. I awoke and walked more. Time must have worked differently down there. The atmosphere felt languid and disorienting. I'm not sure how long I spent wandering. I found sprawling pictographs on the inside of a domed building. They depicted an aquatic people that once ruled this underwater world. I saw 100-foot effigies of a multi-headed dragon-like beast with a multitude of clawed legs and a variety of gills spread out across its form. Among them were other, smaller statues of the beast rolled into a ball. Sometime during my interminable sentence spent in that sunken kingdom, I realized the ball statues were depicting the beast's likeness as an infant, curled up in an egg. That gave new meaning to the glowing green orb on the horizon. Sometimes after staring at the green sun for hours, I thought I could decipher the outline of the fetal beast wrapped in on itself, pulsing with life, waiting to be born. Eventually, my mind slipped away from me. I heard voices. Matilda's, Bradley's, a barking dog I thought might have been Laika. Sometimes I spoke to them. Other times I didn't, just grateful for the company. And then, after a long while, I died. I was brought back to life on a lobster boat. Two grizzled Mainers with accents like molasses found me floating listlessly and pulled me aboard. They scraped off my suit and resuscitated me on the fish gut-strewn deck of their little lobster tug. They thought I was dead. My skin was cold, pale as a fish belly. Then I blinked to life. I took a rattling breath of fresh air, savoring the salty taste on my tongue. I looked up at the real world, at the two men around me. All I could do was cry. I was brought to a hospital, then airlifted to the one I'm in now. Matilda came to visit me immediately. She asked me what had happened. I told her. I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe me. I wouldn't believe me. I was gaunt, my hair long, my beard scraggly. I looked like I had survived a lifetime on a desert island, except for the fact that I was ghostly pale and not sunburned to a crackling brown. But it was good seeing her, until she looked me in the eyes, told me I had been missing for 8 months. Military man after military man came to visit me. Higher-ups in crisp uniforms weighed down by medals. I was interviewed until my head spun. My story never changed. I told them to check my handheld camera. I learned it was never recovered. Whether they didn't believe me or didn't want to wasn't entirely clear. I had my scar to back up my story, and my time spent missing. I told them to send another man down, but they gave me some bureaucratic word vomit about how the risk assessment blah 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 blah. Apparently that suit I'd taken down wasn't cheap. Who would have thought? In the end, none of what I said seemed to matter. Perhaps they figured me for a deserter who took their top secret tech and defected to God knows where. Tralfamador, maybe. All I know is that at some point or another I was declared insane and ordered to a stint of convalescence, where I remain. I've tried to make sense of it all, but I can't. I wonder about the ladder, and whether it was built as an invitation to that underwater place, or as an escape. Since I've gotten back, there's been a hollow ache in the center of my chest, a low hum in the pit of my soul. It's constant. It's dread. Dread at what I've seen. Dread at what might be growing in that green sun. Dread at what might become of the world if that thing ever rises to reclaim its kingdom. I've come to the end of my tale, and I still don't feel any better. Every time I close my eyes, I see that green sun. I see it pulsing and flickering with life. And now I know for certain it's an egg. The end. Story 2. Stay away from the ocean. It's not safe anymore. In 1989, we detected a faint call coming from the depths of the ocean. A strange cry from a massive creature, traveling alone in the vast blue waters below. At first, it sounded like an oddity, a malfunctioning hydrophone, but then we heard it again in 1990 and 1991. With only 5% of the ocean explored, it baffled us. To any untrained ear, it sounded like a whale, but its pitch was too high. Measuring at a frequency of 52 hertz, it meant that the song couldn't be understood by any known species of whale. Thus, it was destined to exist on its own, and has been dubbed the loneliest creature in the world. We called him Blue 52. Every year, we'd hear the lonesome whale, measured through hydrophones spread across the west coast of America and Canada. Still, it wouldn't be until 2019 before we finally lay eyes upon it. Our crew was tasked with finding him, tag him with a tracker, and observe for others like him. On board the RV Song of Solitude, we traversed the North Pacific in search of a whale that had been heard, but never seen. With technology constantly advancing, tracking it had become a much easier task. While it took us weeks just to locate him, we grew closer with each passing day. "Do you think he knows?" Rita asked as we stared out at the horizon. The ocean was calm, gently rocking our large research vessel. It was wonderfully peaceful, and though our mission was interesting, it carried an undeniable hint of dread. "Knows what?" I asked. She sighed. "That there are others like him out there?" It was a fair question. Whether or not the strange frequency of its voice was caused by a deformity, or if it was a hybrid species, it had to have been raised by someone. Whale calves stay approximately 1 year with their mothers as they grow and get ready to face the oceans alone. I don't know. Why else would he sing? The whale had been traveling in the same path as blue whales, yet the timing was off. It meant that despite it going exactly the same way, it would never meet anyone else on its journey. Wherever he swam, the others would be long gone. 40 years alone, just looking for someone else. She trailed off. Weeks passed as we searched, and in the late summer of 2019, we finally found him. There it was, surfacing for a breath of fresh air. An 80-feet-long whale, spurting a fountain of water from his blowhole. He had a magnificent blue color, yet the shape of his body resembled that of a fin whale. Our theory of it being a hybrid had been confirmed, and he looked extraordinarily healthy considering that he had survived on his own for so long. "He's magnificent," Rita exclaimed in excitement. Without hesitation, we planted a tracker on his skin with a suction cup and let him dive back beneath the ocean. We went to work and recorded more of his song, a somber tune of melancholy. We spent the next 3 weeks just tracking him, hoping to see another of his kind. Alas, he remained alone. During the nights, I often found Rita staring out at the ocean, marking each time he surfaced to breathe. "He looks too sad." "How can you tell?" I asked. "I don't know. Just a gut feeling, I guess. Poor Eros." "Eros?" "Yeah, I figured we're the closest thing he has to a family. We ought to be the ones naming him." I mulled over the name for a moment. It certainly sounded better than Blue 52. A bit ironic though, don't you think? Not at all. As the mission went on, Rita started sleeping less and less. She was afraid that we'd lose Eros if we didn't keep a constant eye on him. Whales hardly ever sleep, constantly needing to resurface, always on the move. Of all the mammals, they have the lowest requirement for sleep. We were 2 months into our mission when I was shook awake in the middle of the night. As I opened my heavy eyes, I saw Rita standing above me with a wide smile on her face. "There's another whale!" she shouted. We rushed to the control room, where Captain Banks stood, eyes fixed on a new set of frequencies. Sure enough, there were 2 distinct, but similar sources of sound coming from about 1,000 feet below. I knew it. I knew Eros wasn't alone. Suddenly, our depressing job had turned to one of joy. If there were 2, we could assume with high probability that there were more. In fact, we might have been witnessing the beginning of a new subspecies of whale. It was a beautiful moment to behold. "You sure it's not just a malfunction?" one of the crew members asked. I took a look at the numbers. Eros' voice had lowered a bit in his later years, at 50 hertz, while the other, News source was slightly higher pitched. Could it be a calf? No idea. The sonar isn't picking anything up. We need to get closer. We waited until morning and tried to get closer to Eros. According to the sonar readings, there was a creature roughly twice the size of our whale, swimming a couple of thousand feet beneath the surface. Even for a whale, it was huge. About an hour passed, and we finally caught Eros coming up for air. Despite tracking two distinct beings, only one of them ever breached the surface. Do you see anything? I asked. No, it's not coming up. Are we sure it's a whale? What else could it be? I don't know, but even whales can't hold their breath forever. We discussed the possibility of a new species entirely, but before we could even alert our superiors back on the mainland, we heard something else. It was a third song, then a fourth, and a fifth, and before long, a whole pod of these creatures had been detected. They were massive, far larger than any known creature to occupy the ocean. It was a frightening but intriguing discovery. We were ordered to send down a submersible drone to get an actual view of the beings. I controlled the machine as it quickly descended down 1,000 feet. We held our breaths as the light of the sun gave way to the darkness of the ocean. Before long, we'd be right on top of the unidentified animals. Where the hell are they? Captain Banks asked. There. I saw something. It was Eros, diving down to follow the drone. He seemed to understand that the device belonged to us and started leading us towards the other creatures. We followed Eros down further, 2,000 feet below the surface before we finally found them. At first, all we saw were yellow, glowing orbs dangling in the darkness. Then, we saw the true monstrosities we'd discovered. They're not whales, Rita gasped. They looked like torn pieces of bright green flesh, bobbing up and down like jellyfish through the water. They had massive bodies covered in glowing blisters. Dozens of tendrils reached out from their mangled mass. What we assumed to be their heads had multiple dark holes with thin membranes through which they emitted their songs. What are they? I asked. Before my question could be answered, one of the crew members shouted out in protest. All we heard was a splash as someone dropped into the water. Wait, no! He shouted. What happened? Captain Banks asked. Simon, he just took an anchor and jumped off the ship. We peeled our eyes in a hopeless search for the lost sailor, but he was long gone. Call the mainland. Tell them what happened, Captain Banks ordered. Get the drone back up. It's time to leave. I glanced back at the screen. The camera had gone dark, and we'd lost contact with the drone. With little hesitation, we decided to set course for the coast. The footage would serve as enough documentation of our discovery. We were still days away from reaching land, but we didn't have any other choice. Nightfall came and plunged us into overwhelming darkness. Nothing but a million stars above to keep us lit up in the night. Despite their beauty, they signified the immense size of emptiness surrounding us. What do you think we just saw? I asked the captain. He looked over the multiple recordings we'd gotten from our hydrophones. They all matched the voice of Eros in terms of frequency, yet the rhythm seemed completely off. Whale songs can travel 100 miles, no problem. Based on the composition of these things, I'd say they were airless creatures. It would suggest that they come from the very depths of the ocean beneath us, but I can't say for sure. You think Eros alerted them with his voice? He nodded. Why else would they venture this far up? Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of an anchor moving on deck. We rushed outside to find Rita standing by the edge, staring longingly into the ocean below. Rita, what are you doing? They're calling for me. Oh, the dancers of the sea. Their songs are so beautiful. Don't you hear them? Rita, please step away from the edge, Captain Banks begged. I took a slow step towards her, ready to snatch her away from the edge. Before I could even get close, she just stepped over and fell into the water. Rita! I shouted in despair as she sank out of sight. By the time we could even turn around to search for her, she'd be too far gone to rescue. Anyone that willingly jumped into the depths could never be rescued. Captain Banks jumped on the radio, getting ready to demand an airlift back to the mainland. Yet, The only sound that greeted us on the other end was the damn song from the depths. Whatever these creatures were, they interfered with our system, making it impossible to call for help. We were effectively trapped. On the ocean, 100 glowing orbs appeared. The creatures, despite coming from thousands of feet below, had the ability to surface, and they were heading straight for us. Oh God, there was all I could get out before the ship shook violently. A tendril reached out from the water and grabbed onto one of the crewmen. He screamed in agony as it pierced his abdomen, pulling him into the water. Captain Banks took a knife and tried to cut one of the tendrils that had wrapped around our deck. It was a futile task, and another quickly wrapped around his leg, instantly snapping the bone within. He screamed as the creature tore at him, digging into the leg and reaching through his abdomen. He was dead before he even hit the water. The ship started to topple over, and I clung to the railing. Then, something rammed us, and the ship fell back into place. The tendrils retreated into the ocean, and we were temporarily free. I looked for any sign of my crewmen, but they'd all been snatched away. Alone, I peeked into the waters and saw what had been my unlikely hero. It was Eros. He had plunged his massive body into the monster, which had redirected its attention towards him. It dug its tendril into his body, blood filling the waters. He kept swimming, pulling away from the monstrosities, and they followed. In his wake, he left a trail of blood, leading them away from my damaged vessel, giving me an opportunity to escape. I set course in the opposite direction, not hesitating to make use of the escape window granted to me. The creatures didn't follow, but I never stopped fleeing. It took another full day before I finally made contact with the mainland. I alerted them to the situation, and they sent a ship out to meet me. I'd sustained minor injuries. My crew, on the other hand, had all but succumbed to the horrors of the ocean. I don't know what happened to Eros, if he managed to get away, or if the things caught up with him. Whatever the case, he saved my life, and I owe him everything. In his search for a family, he inadvertently awoke something from the deepest parts of the ocean. According to recent hydrophone recordings, there are millions of them across the Pacific, and they're spreading further and further around the world. The seas are no longer safe, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. I might have made it back to shore, but what truly horrifies me is that despite being 1,000 miles away, I still hear them singing. At first, they were only sounds, but now I finally understand. They want me to come to them, and I don't know how long I can resist.